Hey, welcome back, parents. Raise your hand if you have a picky eater or you know someone who's a picky eater. I'm raising my hand over here because we've got one or two at my house. And it turns out that studies show that 50% of kids are actually picky eaters. So if that's happening at your house, no shame. This is just an issue that we want to help you resolve today. So, what I've noticed about kind of doing my own research on picky eating is that when I go to the Google, what it spits back to me are like ideas of brand new meals with foods I've never even heard of, or spices that I'm going, is that a real thing? Or the Pinteresty ideas of like how to turn your food into an art project to appeal to your kids. And I don't know about you, but all of that sounds like a whole lot more work for me. No, thank you. Like mealtime is already a lot of work. So today on the show, we've got a guest who has this idea of solving the problem of picky eating kind of like mastered. So this is going to be awesome. I just definitely want you to stay plugged into the episode because we're going to solve problems like being a short order cook. I don't know about you, but I feel like that a lot of times. Your kids no longer eating healthy foods they used to eat when they were a baby. Squash, broccoli, nope, won't have it anymore. And then the problem of just enjoying a family meal without somebody constantly complaining. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Katie Kimball.
Thank you, Jordan. I am so on board with everything you said. And you know what? It's all about less work for parents because short order cooking is a lot of work and we think it's solving a problem, but it's definitely a short-term Band-Aid.
You know it. You guys, Katie is a wife. She's a mom to 4. She's a teacher, a 2-time TEDx speaker. She's a cookbook author, a certified stress mastery educator, and a regular TV contributor. So, Katie, you're here to talk to us about how picky eating may actually not be about the food. Is that right?
It's so interesting how parents perk up when I say that. Like, you guys, picky eating's not about the food because that's, we see that the kids are struggling with certain foods or all foods. And it feels like food is the solution. But because food generally is not the root cause, it's also not the solution.
That sounds like great news. I mean, what is it all about? You have a whole TEDx talk about picky eating. So what do you tell us in there?
I talk about the 5 P's of picky eating, and those are palate, pain, processing, pressure, and power. And so the first 3 are completely in the child's body. It's a physiological issue that's going on that's just getting in the way of their ability to interact with food in, kind of the ways we expect and to have a good relationship with food. And then the last 2, the pressure and the power, is about the child's relationship with the parent. It's really interesting, Jordan, that research actually says that parenting styles and even parenting baggage, like I have a bad relationship with food or I have, depression or anxiety, doesn't actually cause picky eating. So we can all kind of release that we did not cause our kids picky eating. Now, is it possible that we can exacerbate a problem that's already there by the way we respond to it? Sure. Absolutely. We can magnify it, but that's good news too, because that also means that we can help diminish it. So I'll just throw out a couple of those physiological ideas. It's so funny because before you and I got on, we were talking about background noise on this podcast. Like, can you hear my husband typing? And Jordan, you explained to me that you have incredibly sensitive hearing. And
true.
When you're out with your husband and you're flinching in the restaurant, and I actually have a little bit of a sound sensitivity as well. So like on those like granite and quartz countertops, when people are setting down glasses or ceramics, it's like very grating to me. And it's so interesting because I talked with a friend who was actually saying, I just love that sound. I love the sound of a wine glass being set on a granite countertop. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that could not be more opposite. So that's really good for parents to understand, is that the way we process the world through our senses is very likely to be different from the way our children, each one of them individually, processes the world through our senses, right? And we have,
Yes.
we have one body. And so we can say, oh, like a sound sensitivity, that's not going to impact eating. That's totally separate. We think, but it's not.
Right.
Right? Because if your sense of sound or your sense of sight or your sense of touch is being overwhelmed by your environment, your capacity to do anything, have a good conversation, keep control of your behavior, eat a new food, your capacity is just simply diminished. And especially because food is so sensory, right?
Mm.
We do hear our food. We hear when we chew, we see our food, we touch our food, we taste it. Like it actually uses every sense we have. So if any sense is on overload, the kids can't approach the food in a positive way. And that, if your child seems to process their senses in a different way than what we might call, quote, normal, right? If they struggle with loud sounds, like busy environments, right? If they struggle being in a big crowd, if they do struggle with like the texture sensitivities, it could be the seams in the socks, the tags on the clothes, the itchy, right? Like I have a wool coat that I love for winter, but if I wear it for too long, my shoulders will be tense for a day because they're
Yes.
that like itchy kind of big collar on my neck. Right. And so any of that stuff, those are signs that we parents want to say, okay, wait a second. I do see that in my child. It is time to put your detective hat on and question, could this be impacting their relationship with food? Right? Could
Mm.
it be? And we can examine the foods they eat too. Again, it's not about the food, it's about their relationship with the food. But if you notice that your kids love the like super highly seasoned, processed stuff, the fire Doritos and Cheetos and all that stuff, and they just want more like salt and pepper and seasoning, it's possible that they underprocess, right? Their
Oh,
sense of taste. Isn't that interesting? And that they just
yes.
need so much sensory input. For them, a fire Cheeto is like a regular Cheeto to you and I. That could be a category of foods where you go, oh, that's interesting. They really gravitate toward those. Or the opposite would be, a kid who really gravitates away from kind of the mushy texture, the mashed potatoes, the beans, or any, just what's fascinating is when I teach parents about picky eating, it like opens their eyes to how kids see food, right? We tend
Yes.
to see it with the food pyramid, or right, like chicken is chicken and apples are apples, and an apple is a fruit. And so I'm going to see, does my kid have trouble with fruit? But that's not how kids interact with food.
Mm.
Okay. So like a Granny Smith apple and a Honeycrisp apple, like just imagine those in your mouth. They're completely different taste.
Totally.
Right. And if we think about chicken, grilled chicken, totally different texture than like a slow cooker chicken that's shredded and just completely falling apart. Right. And so we've got to look through a kid's eyes when we categorize food. They do not categorize it intellectually, academically, the way we do, because we've learned all this stuff. Right.
Mm.
What is a fruit? What is a protein? Like that's not how they categorize things. So you want to think about texture categories. You want to think about, general taste categories, but texture is a really big one. Even for kids, like a Ritz cracker and a saltine cracker and a goldfish cracker can be different. They're all crackers, they're all crunchy, but just pay attention next time you eat some of these foods. Like, how does it actually melt in your mouth? Does it crumble in your mouth? Right? Because
Yes.
another block that kids can have for how they approach food is the way they've learned to chew and swallow.
Mm.
Okay. So when we think about that chicken, a lot of our picky eaters struggle with what we call real meats, as in they're not processed. They're not chicken nuggets that are already like pre-chewed in a way, right? Or
Yes.
hot dogs,
Yes.
sausages. Think about the picky eater foods. They're often very easy to chew.
Oh, that's so true because they gravitate towards my son will eat nuggets every day of his life if I let him.
But not grilled
He
chicken, I bet, right?
right. He's like, do we have to have more chicken? And I'm like, you just had chicken nuggets and loved them. So I was telling him like it's the same thing, but you're telling me no, Jordan, it's not. They process them so different.
Mhm.
Okay, keep going. This is fascinating.
Right? Isn't that bonkers? You're like, chicken is chicken. And he's
Right.
like, I'm not feeling it, mom. We are not on the same page, but he can't articulate that. He's a kid, right?
Yes.
He just knows this chicken I like, this chicken I don't. And it could be that it's easy to chew because some
Mm-hmm.
kids just struggle with their chewing strength or their tongue strength. Like there's actually 32 steps to learning to eat. Isn't that crazy?
Whoa.
And there's quite a few steps. If you think about, again, next time, or like grab a bite of food right now, guys, if you're listening to this podcast, put it in your mouth and like focus. What do you have to do to chew it? Oh my goodness, guess what? You've already used your tongue because you probably moved that food from the front of your mouth to your molars. Some kids can't do that with their tongue. Guess what? Food stinks. Dinner is not fun. Breakfast is hard. It's a chore, right? And then when you swallow, your tongue needs to go like scoop all the food together. It has to go to the top of your mouth. It has to get it down your throat in a safe way, right? It has to collect it from the teeth. It's like a whole process. There are kids who don't do that well. And it could be their genetic, it could be literally like you're just born that way. It could be the fact that they had a different steps, different process when they were learning to eat. Like we've got these pouches now. And throughout history, where do you see babies sucking actual food, not breast milk or formula, out of a pouch?
Oh, like
right?
the applesauce packets or the veggie squeezy packets that you just squeeze into your mouth, and that's food versus drinking milk. Which
so we can talk about those pouches. My oldest is 18. When he was born, most like baby food was just starting to shift out of the cute little glass jars into plastic tubs.
Yep.
But now if you go down the baby food aisle, again, my youngest is 9. So it's been a while since I've needed it, right? Mm-hmm. But when I go down the baby food aisle, it's pouches now.
You're so right.
There's not little scoopy. There are some, but there's not a lot of tubs or jars or containers that you scoop out of. So let's talk pouches for a minute. What does this do? First of all, mouth structure. It's going to be a different like sucking feel. Okay. Yes. And that can change the way that those muscles develop when they're, 0 and 1 and 2, et cetera. So you might end up with a child who has weaker muscles, has trouble chewing and swallowing. The food actually misses the front of the mouth, kind of shoots right to the back. Yes. That's also not naturally how we eat. It generally starts in the front, and I got to do that tongue tip lateralization to move it to the back. So if you're doing a lot of pouches, you miss that. Also, you don't get the visual and the olfactory, the sense of smell sort of interaction with your food, nor do kids with pouches get to touch it.
Oh gosh, Katie, this is blowing my mind because I've used pouches with my 2 little ones, but like you said, my oldest is 17 and we spoon in the tub to the mouth, then hand him the spoon. And this even with the hand motion of squeezing a pouch versus scooping, right? And delivering. Guys, if you are listening to this podcast episode, you might want to switch over to YouTube because we're using our hands and she's showing, the mouth and the tongue and how you move things around. But you can go to Families of Characters YouTube channel and watch this play out. So, okay, keep going about this pouch thing. This is making so much sense, Katie.
So I love that you said you handed the spoon to your kids. That's super important. And then what happens? Like picture the images that you have from that time of your life when the child has the spoon in their hands. Food is everywhere.
Yes.
Right? It's on their forehead. It's on their face. It's in their hair. It's up to their shoulders. Believe it or not, kids actually need to experience their food in all of those places, front of their hands, back of their hands, palms, like elbows, forehead. Yep. And so for kids who maybe like for whatever reason, right? And again, parents, guys, no judgment. Like the culture has handed us pouches. That seemed like a great idea. And I've seen people like they squeeze it out of the pouch onto the spoon and they feed the baby and the babies stay very clean.
Yes.
And that can be like accidentally misguided as well. Like if your kids have not had spaghetti on their heads, it could be an interruption, right? So, if you're learning to play volleyball, you got to figure out the bump, the set, the spike, the serve, right? If you don't know how to do half that stuff, you might be really good at some parts of volleyball, but you're still going to be a stinky pants player.
Totally.
Right? So it's the same with eating. There's 32 steps. If your child accidentally between the ages of 1 and 2 or 0 and 2, and we might be talking about a current 10-year-old, current 12-year-old. So believe me, parents, I'm not talking to parents of toddlers right now. I'm talking to everybody. If your kid had any interruption in those 32 steps for eating, they might feel like they're not very good at eating. It's hard. It's a chore. And so they figure out workarounds. They figure out how to fill those gaps, right? They might choose easier to chew food. They might gravitate toward toward or away from mushy textures, depending on how their tongue and their lips and their teeth and everything developed. And we can look at the rise in processed foods too with another reason. What do humans do? We do what's easy,
Right.
right? It might be called laziness, but really, like, all of us are created to conserve energy.
Yes. And as a
Right?
busy parent, we're always trying to find the quick fix to,
Mhm.
streamline things, including meals and getting
Yeah.
food down the hatch, right?
Yep. And physically with our bodies, like, why is it hard to go to the gym sometimes, or hard to, like I have a standing desk. I know I should stand and sit regularly throughout the day. What did I do this morning? I sat for 2 hours
Right.
because I didn't want to interrupt myself. Right. So literally, like, as humans, we gravitate toward the ease, and it's not because we're lazy. It's because we're conserving energy in case we need it later. Right. It's good
Mm.
design.
This goes back
But
to like caveman days, right? You have to
yeah,
conserve your energy to be ready for the fight, or be ready
sure.
for what's coming at you that you aren't ready for, or don't know about.
Yeah, it's good design, right, by the creator, but in our modern world, we're like ill adapted because
Yes.
everything is so easy. And so one really interesting sort of facet of processed foods is that they're very familiar, they're very comfortable, and they're always the same. Okay?
Mm.
If you open that same brand of chicken nuggets, it's going to taste exactly the same every
Every
single
time.
time with like 0.1% variation. If you make homemade chicken nuggets, guess what? It's a little spicier this time. That's a little tougher this time because you cooked it longer, right? Like everything take the apple again. Every apple you bite into might be a little softer, a little riper. It's chilled. It's not. And so kids who are already struggling a little bit, right, to approach food with curiosity instead of fear, if they're given something that's the same every time and they know exactly what to expect, that's very comforting and it's very easy. And so that's why a lot of our kids go to the processed foods as their foods of preference
It's
when they're struggling.
predictable. It's
Mm-hmm.
predictable. They know if they liked that pouch, they're going to go back to the same pouch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I
And
see
some
what
kids
you're
are brand
saying.
loyal to mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. Like they won't even shift brands because of that. And again, this is not something I'm saying, parents, you have to stop. But I'm saying, parents, it's worth looking. It's worth assessing and going, oh my goodness, maybe, so what's the solution for things like brand loyalty is we have to try to push our kids a little bit. We have to at least expose them to other options that aren't the same. Because if they get the same, again, we're not causing the picky eating, but we're certainly magnifying it if we continue to sort of play into their ease. We
Mm.
want to raise the bar a little bit for our kids.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And I'm sitting here thinking also about the label, just as a therapist, and I've never been really fond of labels, right? Like, you are a picky eater, and you hear me talk about how you are picky every day when we serve dinner to you,
Mm-hmm.
because then they kind of take this on as, well, it's kind of a shroud of shame, so to speak, like, oh, I'm different, and everybody knows me as the one that doesn't like stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as I'm thinking of that, and then thinking of, your conversation about the applesauce pouches versus actual apples, and varying the tastes, I'm thinking one way to quickly eliminate this, like, casting out of one person in the family because of their, picky eating, would be to just kind of like make this into a family challenge, right? Like, hey guys, let's go from the pouch applesauce to trying like 3 different apples, and let's all do it together.
It's a great idea. I'm a huge opponent of labels as well, especially when it comes to picky eating, because it can be that shameful feel, but it also can be a badge of honor, right? If it's like,
Totally.
oh, so and so is the picky eater, but that picky eater knows that they get special meals, they get special snacks, they get lots of, catering to, they can kind of enjoy that. But I think worst of all, one reason why we really want to remove the phrase picky eater from our vocabulary as parents is because it doesn't allow that growth mindset. It does not
Mm.
allow for any rise in expectations, right? It's if we put them
Yes.
in a picky eater box, they're going to sit there, they're going to be comfortable there, and they're going to find zero reason to bash their way out of the box. right?
Yes.
So I teach parents to use phrases like, you're still learning to eat, right?
Mm.
We're all still learning to eat. Your taste buds aren't grown up yet. Or maybe you'll like that when you're older. All of these are showing the opportunity for growth. And I think that's super important. So I like the word preferenced instead of picky, because we all are preferenced, right?
That's so
Every
true.
single one of us has something we don't like, and if like my husband doesn't really like salmon, I don't like cherry tomatoes. If we were served a meal of salmon and cherry tomatoes, we would look like a couple of picky eaters,
Sure.
And so I think we can kind of try to build our empathy for our kids, that we all have preferences. They're just at a different point in the process of learning to eat. So that's super important. And yes, definitely everything should be as a family unit. And that's huge. So yes, trying new things as a family and making that fun, but without pressure, because pressure
Yes.
and power are two of those P's of picky eating. But also serving the same food to the family. This has so many positive implications. Okay. First of all, family dinners we know are incredibly powerful. They help increase academic success. They're a protective factor against drugs and alcohol and depression and suicidal tendencies. Like family dinners, starting at 2 per week, it's not a huge goal. You don't have to have 7 per week, 2
Mm-hmm.
meals per week together. You begin to see benefits for your kids in so many areas. So, what does a good family dinner look like? Is it super stressful? And you're trying to get your kids to eat and bribing them. If you eat 3 bites of broccoli, you can have your dessert, or you have to clear your plate before you leave the table, or you have to try 1 bite even. Like all of these are power struggles that we can't win.
Yes, this is so good. And if you're a grandparent listening to this, tune in because you're going to be serving your picky grandchildren. And so
Right.
if you can do the same thing that their parents are doing, right? That shows consistency to the kid as well and always has great benefits.
For sure, for sure. So when we sit down at the family dinner, we've got to reduce the power struggles, which means no requirements to eat. And we can dig into that a little bit more too. But also, a family dinner should show family unity, right? Everyone should be eating the same meal. And I know for parents of more extreme picky eaters, if you're thinking like they literally only eat this brand of chicken nuggets, this brand of mac and cheese, that can be really fear inducing. But what it means is temporarily you keep the crutch of the quote picky eater food,
Mm-hmm.
but you serve everyone everything. So if that mac and cheese is on the table, it's not just for child A, right? It's
Oh,
for
yes.
everybody. You pass it all around. Everybody can take a little scoop. You might even, just to demonstrate family unity, you might put a little bite on your plate. Whether you eat it or not, it doesn't matter, because guess what? We're also not going to require our kids to eat, because respectful parents, there's no possible way you can win. What if I said to you, Jordan, you have to eat 1 bite of whatever food it is before you leave the table, and you say no?
Right.
I'm stuck. I am not going to put food in your mouth, make your jaw chew, and make you swallow. Yuck. Like that
Torture
is so disrespectful.
for everyone. Yes.
So it's kind of like rule 1 as parents, right? Don't say anything that you won't follow through on, because
Yes.
then they know that you won't follow through, right? But yeah, we do it at the table.
You're so
We do
right.
it all the time. And so if we literally can't follow through, this is what Ellen Satter calls the division of responsibility. The child's role is to decide whether they eat at all and how much they eat. And so anything that we do as parents that have to do with whether they eat and how much, including all those phrases I just said, right? You eat
Yeah.
this, you 3 bites and this and that, they don't work, because you can't actually follow through. What your role is as the adult is to choose when food is eaten, right? You can say things like the kitchen is closed. We're not having snack right now. Choose where food is eaten, which, by the way, the family dinner table is the right answer almost all the time.
Yes.
And you choose what is eaten. You choose what is served. Okay. So it's a beautiful weight off parents' shoulders to think, oh my heavens, Katie just said I can just put food on the table and I don't have to say, you have to eat this. And in fact, Katie would say, you should say to your kids, don't worry, you don't have to eat this, but this is what's served, and I have a lot of, obviously I have a ton of other steps and nuances, but that's the basics. Is you serve what you serve.
Yes.
If you know you have a kid who will literally hunger strike, you make sure they have a safe food, that they have one thing that they can eat. but everything is served very unilaterally, very neutrally, and nothing is for one person. And this is okay. Parents will be like, oh, we have food allergies. I'm doing keto. I'm doing the Whole30 or whatever. That's okay. Like figure out then, we rarely, except maybe in the case of a casserole, this is kind of death to casseroles, but other than casseroles, we serve multiple things, right?
Sure.
You might have some raw veggie and a cooked veggie and a protein and a starch or 5 proteins. I don't know what you serve, but most people serve more than one item.
Yes.
It just means you've got to balance them. Right. So it's a little tricky at first so that everyone has something they can eat. But the good thing is the more your quote, formerly known as picky eaters are exposed to new foods, the more they will expand. And then the meal planning gets easier and easier.
I have a couple thoughts going on here. One is, do you notice that the picky eater, even if given multiple choices and different choices, for 2-3 weeks, will hunker down and just eat the nugget that you put on the table? Or when do they start kind of dabbling in something new?
It's a very different answer for different kids, depending on their root cause, right? If there's something physiological going on, or if it's something that can be kind of fixed by just giving them agency and giving them some choices. But the majority of the time, kids start encountering new foods within a week.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, yeah. Or less. Like for a lot of kids, it's a day or two. And it kind of depends on how deeply entrenched those habits are of them feeling like they're going to be forced to eat. And again, this is something that like we were taught as parents to say, you have to eat this, or you not have to try a bite or whatever. Like now you know better. The better phrase is, it's okay. You don't have to eat that. You can say, I'd like you to put a bite on your plate, right? That's something you can follow through on. I just want one bite on your plate, but you don't have to eat it. You don't have to touch it. There's a very small group of kids for whom that won't even work. And then, but those are advanced strategies. We're talking about like your average picky eater here. I'm thinking of a mom, Jessica, who is in my No More Picky Eating Challenge. And she said, I can't do it. I cannot do it because if I don't tell my child 3 cucumbers, 2 strawberries, he won't eat it. I said, but
Ooh.
what if you tried? So she's like, oh, okay. I can't do the full thing, but I'm going to say you have to either eat cucumbers or strawberries and you choose how much. I'm like, you know what? It's a step in the right direction. Let's see what happens. And she came back flabbergasted. She said he actually chose the exact number of cucumbers on his own accord that she would have given him. But there was no arguing, no power struggle. She felt great. He felt great. She's like, I like this.
Yes.
And tried it again immediately at the next meal. And this was a fairly extreme picky eater that she felt like she had to have that control. And it turned out she liked giving up the control and the child thrived.
I can imagine, because she's giving him also 2 choices that are acceptable to her, right? She wants the strawberries and the cucumbers, and then giving him agency over that. Right? You get to choose. And that brings me to another thought. I'm thinking, half the time I put the food on the plate for my kids from the stovetop and hand it to them, and they head off and they're kind of like deflated instantly. Like, oh, she put that thing on here. Oh, now I have to look at it. And I chose the portion for them. And after watching your TED Talk, I'm going, this is so wrong. I mean, I'm trying to, like you said, humans do. We're trying to find the quickest way to streamline things, right? The easiest manner of getting food on the table in front of people, and let's get this party started.
Yep.
But I'm hearing you say that family style, sitting down to the table, putting the pots and pans on the table, passing food around so that you can use all of those steps in learning how to eat, and you can engage your senses in the whole process, is really where it's at.
I'd say at minimum, Jordan, I want to encourage all the parents out there to allow their kids to serve themselves. Okay. Right? If for streamlining purposes, that means from the stove or from the kitchen, our kitchen, generally, we just kind of have like a buffet style feel, right? Everybody walks around and grabs all the bits. That's that's a huge step in the right direction because of those portion sizes, right? If the child has any, even if they're misguided, right? You might be thinking, I never make my kids eat. That's not a thing. But it's possible just because you're an authority figure, right? Even
Totally.
if you're the mom or dad who says, oh, this is so good, you gotta try it, right? You're thinking, you're like super positive. But for a child, that's still pressure because you're an
Mm,
authority figure and they want to please, especially really young kids, right? So we may have created some neural pathways where a child feels like they'll have to eat whatever they see.
mm-hmm.
So when you serve that big plop of mashed potatoes or a big serving of peas and carrots, it gets in front of them and their brain might be going, oh my goodness, I have to eat this. I'm going to have to eat this. And the stress goes up. One of the
Yes.
functions of stress is to decrease your appetite. Ouch, right? This is absolutely what we don't
Oh,
want to do at the table.
right.
And so allowing kids to serve themselves has dual purposes. One, they get that exposure to food, even if they choose not to eat the little taste or whatever, I call it a taster bite that they put on their plate.
Yes.
They get that exposure. And two, they do have the agency to choose a small serving or a small bite if you want. That's another phrase I love teaching parents is, would you like a taster or a serving?
Oh,
Right? Or
great.
would you like an
Yes.
experience bite or a serving? Because the experience bite comes with, don't worry, you don't have to eat it.
Yeah.
It
No
just stays on
pressure.
your plate till the end of the meal. Mm-hmm. And so for some kids, that's like glory, hallelujah, right at the beginning. Parents will say, oh my
Yes.
gosh, I can tell my kids love serving themselves. And it's made an impact at the table already, right? Day one or day two. For other kids, they're a little more hesitant, a little skeptical. It takes longer to unravel the habits that they've got. It's like you have to make sure they actually believe you.
Yes.
You know, when you say, it's okay, you don't have to eat that, they might be thinking, really, what's the catch?
Exactly. Am I going to
So
my
for those
room right
kids,
after this?
yeah. So for those kids, it may take a little longer, but generally people see some progress in again, one week or 2 weeks, but you got to stay consistent, right? Don't
Yes.
start this process and then back off. You mentioned family style serving. I would say, particularly if you have a tough case, you're feeling like, Katie, I've heard you use the word extreme picky eater. I might have one of those. For you, it is highly worth it to take that extra time to serve family style and make a routine or a rule that everybody touches everything, right?
Mm,
It passes in front of you. So even if the child is so stubborn that they won't even take that taster bite, because again, that is something I recommend requiring unless it causes a major power struggle. Then you got to figure out how to like back off of that a little bit. Most kids will at least put the bite on their plate. Massive exposure opportunity. It demonstrates that family unity. And, if it's a little extra work to take things to the table, get those kids involved. Get them
yes.
carrying plates and putting out the trivets or the hot pans. Because that's, again, that exposure can't be understated.
Oh my, this is just blowing my mind here because I'm thinking, back in the day when our grandparents, sat at the table, this is what they did. I mean, there were 3 pots
Yeah.
of food. They passed it around. Everybody touched, smelled, looked. There was no distraction with cell phones and TVs on
Mhm.
because there weren't any, right? So they got this full experience, sensorial experience of food. And even, weight problems weren't really a thing because when you engage your senses, you see what you're eating. You're not eating out of a bag or a pouch, or you're visually observing your food and experiencing it. You're satisfied sooner. And so I love what you're talking about. Like, bring it back to the basics, right? Like, it's okay. 2 times a week, you mentioned like 2 dinners as a family per week is a really good goal to start with. And maybe you start with Sunday because,
Mhm.
we have less activities on Sundays. And so start with family meal on a Sunday and try this, taking a little bit more time with your meal, putting something out there that everybody, enjoys, even your picky eater, right? And then
Mhm.
pass it around so nobody feels left out or singled out, but everybody has an opportunity to try something that's on the table without
And
pressure.
what's great about, a lot of these strategies, you opened up the podcast by saying, oh, the Pinterest perfect, cutesy, crafty, it's taking more of your time stuff, or it changes my grocery list. Like, what's important, I think, about just changing routines is that it takes a little more mental energy at the start, right?
Yes.
Any change takes mental energy. That's why we don't do it, because we seek ease. But it's so worth it because it doesn't actually take more physical time, right? You don't have to change what you purchase. You're just changing the way you're presenting it. You're changing your routines around family dinner, trying to get people to the table. The more I work with parents and parents of kids who are struggling to eat, the more I'm just blown away by how many families don't eat at the kitchen table. They're eating in front of the screen. Some of them are shooting off to different areas of the house. The kids are coming in, they're grabbing their plate, they're going to their bedrooms. And I think this is definitely a breakdown of a lot of things, like even everything we've talked about so far with family dinners, but even as simple as the kids have no model of what eating looks like and what conversation looks like. Right. That's so important. I'm a huge proponent of family dinners. And I've mentioned the word exposure a few times as well. I'm also a really big proponent of getting that exposure away from the table, especially for those kids who might feel a little bit of pressure to eat or have that like in their history. For kids who are power struggling at the table can be a place of stress. And even when you try to remove that stress, it's still a place of remembered stress.
Okay. So you're talking about exposure to food away from just the table. Okay. This is good, because I was having this image of, okay, serve the meal at the table, pass it around. Everything happens at the table, but okay, go for it. Let's talk about food away from the table.
For sure. I mean, so what the science says is that everyone needs a certain number of exposures for them to accept that food. And so, that advice that we were given when our kids were toddlers, all the well-meaning aunties and uncles would say, oh, like, don't give up. After one time of peas, they need 10 tries and then they'll like it, right?
Yes.
Isn't that exactly how they sounded?
Totally.
But what we know is that not all kids are the same. And so the number 10 is just, it's floating in the air, right? That's not real. Some kids are going to like their peas after one try. Some kids, maybe our more sensitive kids, our more selective eaters, they might need 187 exposures to peas before their body is like, oh, this is now a familiar thing.
Yes.
So that's a lot of peas to put on the plate.
Yes, it is.
187. And we don't know, right? We don't know what the number is. What I like to think of it as an exposure bucket, right? It's an opaque bucket. We can't see in. We don't know when it will overflow and the child will finally start to at least accept that food a little bit. But our job is to keep putting drops into that exposure bucket for every food we can. The good news is the science says any exposure counts. It does not have to be a taste.
Okay.
Right? So you can take your kids to the grocery store or the farmer's market, have them pick out some produce. One, check, right? They've touched it.
Okay.
They can wash that produce. Even a little 2-year-old, right? They
totally
love playing in the water, making a little mess. They can wash it. They can wash it productively or unproductively. That doesn't matter. They do a good job, but they're touching that food. We can teach kids to cut up the food. 3, we can teach them to cook the food, right? To stir it around, or even just like put your kid on your hip, right? And say, hey, do you want to stir this with me? They put their hand over your hand on a big wooden spoon and stir that pot, right? All the aromas come out. Now we've got another exposure. You can have your kids serve that food. They can carry it to the table. That's another exposure. They can serve you food. Talk about building a culture of service and generosity, right? Those are important values for me to pass on to my kids. What if you had a meal where everyone served the parents their food?
That is awesome. Yes. Yes.
So every exposure counts. And if you've got a more selective kid, their buckets are deeper, right? Yes. And they're annoying because you're like, please just eat the broccoli, right?
Yes.
So it's a beautiful gift to know that every single exposure counts. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a huge proponent of teaching kids to cook, because it's away from the table. I mean, there's a billion benefits, but when it comes specifically to eating and to having a good relationship with food, building that relationship before dinner starts, in case there is remembered stress at the table, super critical.
love what you're saying, and it can totally see how having multiple exposures in different environments, you said the grocery store, just cutting things up, stirring something, smelling it as it's cooking, right? Like putting it away in the pantry or the refrigerator, right? Just observing it with your senses really takes the pressure off me as a parent. I'm feeling like it's not all about the table either. It's not about the food, and it's not all about, the actual meal, but it's about preparation. It's about, bringing it home. It's about picking it out and choosing it. So this already my stress level is just like whoosh, gone down. I'm like, oh, there's so many options and so many ways that I can influence a picky eater to engage food in new ways so that there's a chance. Like you're saying, there's a chance, Katie.
I am saying there's a chance, and you're right. You have options. There's many pathways, to that. And just to give another eating benefit to cooking, when we think about another fact of human nature is we don't love open loops, right? Kids or adults, we don't really like unfinished business. We like to close our loops. We like to finish our books and our movies.
Yes.
Right? We like to finish our conversations. Think about some of the greatest friction points with your kids. It's, hey, it's dinner time. And they're in their game.
Yes.
Right? Whether that's a game on a screen or a board game, or they're playing with rocks and sticks. If they don't have closure, they are unhappy beings.
Oh, so true.
They emote that. Okay. But if I don't have closure as an adult, I'm an unhappy being. I just don't throw the same tantrum. Right. Point is, we like that closure. And so how do we open that loop for eating? How cool is it that being part of the preparation of the meal absolutely begins an open loop for our kids? And so not for all of them. Again, the more selective, the more stubborn, we got to be a little more savvy. But for many kids, they have this sort of feeling of, oh, like I want to finish what I started. They're more likely to try the food that they've had a hand in preparing. And so that's, there's like again, twofold, the exposure and the ownership.
Yes.
That really propels them to maybe having a better encounter with that food once they're at the table.
I have noticed that in my own home, that once I got over the fact that getting my kids in the kitchen was going to, require a little bit more time on my part. And I just, accepted that and went with it in small bits, right? They started really loving being part of kind of cutting things up, bananas, making a little fruit salad, taking the stems off things and mixing it together. And at the beginning, there wasn't hot stoves and fire and, anything we had to be too concerned about. We give them a kind of a dull knife and they were able to cut things, but then they want to see and they want to present it. They have so much confidence and courage. They want to present it to the family and try my fruit salad, they get really excited about that. And so I could see how even if they don't like the strawberries, they love the fruit salad, the way it looks, they had a hand in it. And so then they may be more willing over time to try the strawberries. This is so awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay. So your jam is teaching kids how to cook. You have a whole website, kidscookrealfood.com. And so tell us what's the best way to get started in engaging our kids in the kitchen and cooking and all of this?
It's really to break things down into bite-sized chunks, pun intended, right? So we're talking about eating, but part of it is one of our big roadblocks as parents, I think, is thinking that this is a big thing to do, teach my kids to cook. This is going to be very messy. They're going to slow me down, right? So we've got to dismantle some of those psychological roadblocks and realize, you know what? If you can take your 3-year-old or your 5-year-old or your 7 or 10-year-old, teach them how to measure a teaspoon of salt or a spice or an herb, right?
Yes.
That is not going to take you very long.
Right.
It does not have to make a mess. You can do it. Again, never teach your kids to cook. I always tell parents this, do not teach your kids a new skill in that time before dinner. It's when they want to help, but it's when you are the most stressed, right? About time pressures. So don't
you're
teach
so
them
right.
then. Let them practice it then. So if your kids say, Mom, can I help? And you're like, I have 17 minutes to get dinner on the table, or somebody's missing soccer, right? That's real. And so you do yes, and you say, yes. And I'm going to teach you something tomorrow after snack, right? Or tomorrow after school. Pick a time block it in 5 minutes. And then tomorrow for dinner, you can practice that skill, right?
Great.
So let's roll with the measuring a teaspoon. So you're making some Italian something for dinner. And so you get out the basil and the oregano, and you have some little spill bowls. If you've got, a small child, put them at the table.
Yes.
They're not in your way. They're not slowing you down. You've taught them the skill. And now you can say, okay, honey, I need 2 teaspoons of oregano.
Right.
Doesn't really matter how long they take.
Yes.
Right. They could literally take 7 minutes, which would drive you crazy if you were trying to do it next to them.
Totally.
But it's okay. They're out of your space. They bring their little bowl with the 2 teaspoons of oregano. If you need to, you can surreptitiously check it and make sure it's pretty close, right?
Yes.
That goes into your Italian meal. Then you say, okay, now I need 1 teaspoon of the basil. That starts with the B, or it has the red lid, whatever. Like, kids do not have to know how to read. They don't have to know their numbers or their fractions for this.
Yes.
Now they measure that out. Doesn't matter how long it takes. They bring it to you. It goes in. At dinner, you get to do an awesome thing. You get to pour a real authentic compliment into your child by saying, oh, this flavor is so good. Right? Different tone of voice if they're little versus if they're 12, obviously.
Right.
But, like, who's responsible for the delicious flavor in this meal? Oh, right. It's my 3-year-old, and they're beaming.
Yes.
Their confidence is through the roof. And guess who wants to come help with more meals? Right? And learn one more skill. And again, that was my 3-year-old example. It works the same for a 12-year-old.
It does.
If they can be part of it, have that ownership, and get an authentic compliment. Usually at that age, it's not as important to get it from the parents. So I always tell people, if you want your older child who's a bit more resistant to start learning cooking, like, figure out any way you can to have them involved in something you're serving others, right? Party, potluck, grandparents are coming over. Make sure you tell the other adults, Bradley was part of this, or Bradley made this. Boom. Authentic compliments. They come, the kid's like, oh, I'm pretty awesome, aren't I? Right? And so
positive reinforcement really does work, Katie. You know it. Oh, I love that. Okay. So getting them involved, but not trying to do this 5 minutes before you need to get dinner on the table. I think it was in one of your TED Talks or something that I saw on your website where you really encourage, just take a little time and block out time on your schedule, maybe 15 minutes on a Saturday morning if you don't have anywhere to go, or it's a wintry day and like Sunday seems like a good time to just sit down and use a knife for the first time and cut up bananas or peel oranges and get the pulp off of them or something, right? Like,
I mean, for little kids, they can tear lettuce, right?
Yes.
For bigger kids, maybe it's just the cracking eggs, or maybe they learn to flipping pancakes. If you can teach your kid that skill, they're kind of into it because it's new to them. And you're like, I just saved half an hour. Thank you very much. This is a huge win, right? So think about work in the kitchen as a collection of tiny little skills. That's all it is.
Yes.
But if we think like, oh my gosh, I want to teach my kids to make muffins. Well, that's like 7 different skills. So it makes sense that you put off, that little thing on your to-do list, make muffins with kids. You're like, oh, don't have the energy today. Right.
Yes.
But could you teach them just to crack the egg?
Yes.
Right. Could you teach them just to stir to a uniform mixture? Could you teach just, measuring spoons? Or, measuring flour is a totally different skill, right, than measuring that teaspoon of salt. So the more we can think about little bitty chunks, and that's kind of always been one of my superpowers, right, is I have the ability to see all the little pieces, pull them apart, put them in a logical order for kids. And then we have really fun phrases that we teach. So like for knife skills, we have a hold called up and over soldier. And we say, keep your hand, hey, out of the way, right? Or like move the knife, like tug of war, or like rockabye baby. And so they're really like kid friendly. They're simple for everyone to learn. And once you have a common vocabulary with your kids, you can help them without having to stand next to them and slow yourself down. Does that make sense?
Yes. And by the way, I just want to tout your cooking class for kids, because in 2020, I think the Wall Street Journal recommended you guys as like the best online cooking class for kids, right?
Yeah, that was a really fun surprise. I have like the real hard copy of that article in my file cabinet.
I would too. I might frame it if I were you. That's a big deal. In 2020, we were all at home all the time. So the fact that you delivered such an awesome resource to a to a family or parents and kids during a time when it was crazy and wild and we were sick of each other and, you know, we were ordering all the latest and greatest gadgets off Amazon or whatever. Like that's a big deal. And so you continue those cooking classes online. It looks like you've got like try your first, you know, knife, using a knife kind of class for free. And then you go on to offer other you know, low cost cooking classes for kids. And this is just fantastic. And it's all at kidscookrealfood.com, right, Katie?
Yes. Yes. And actually, I mean, let's talk about knives. This can be one of those psychological roadblocks for parents. Like, oh my gosh, knives, that's dangerous. I'm not ready for that. Right. Or cooking with fire, that's dangerous. I'm not okay with this.
Yes.
But they're so important. Like these are such important skills. And actually, Lenore Skenazy, who's the founder of Free Range Kids, she does, and the Let Grow Project, which is a nonprofit. She's huge. And like, how do we give kids actual tasks to do? Because we know if kids don't do real tasks, their anxiety actually increases because they don't feel like they have any way to like have any control over their lives or have any agency. They feel like they're floating about. And so she's big on like climb that tree, walk to the store, pay for your own stuff, you know, have a conversation with an adult. She's amazing. And she says that doing things that are just a little dangerous is what's called a beneficial risk. And it is positive. It's like taking a vitamin for your sense of confidence and your anti-anxiety plan, right? I don't want my kids to be in the 1/3 of teens who are clinically anxious or depressed. What? No.
No, that's right.
So they need knives and fire.
Yes.
And they can do it safely if they're taught in a fun, kid-friendly, appropriate way. And most kids, even the kids who are like a little busy, a little impulsive, they tend to respect the fact that a knife is a knife.
Yes.
Okay. And so I would love to give your audience our knife skills class. It's about 10 minutes long. We teach the same ways to hold the food and hold a knife with a butter knife as a chef's knife. So this is for everyone. This is for our 2-year-olds, our 12-year-olds, and the moms.
Yes.
Some moms are like, Katie, I'm learning things too. Don't tell anyone. That's good too. That's good. Lifelong learning. But this 10-minute video will teach your kids the 3 ways to hold the food and the 4 ways to hold the knife, our kid-friendly vocabulary that then you'll have. Right. And so this is your next like Sunday afternoon project. kidscookrealfood.com/families of character. You can get that totally free. It's the class that our members always say is their favorite out of the 45 lessons we have.
Wonderful. And what a great place to start. And guys, if you go to kidscookrealfood.com/families of character, guess what? We get a little something for that too. So we're a nonprofit. We can always use another little cha-ching, you know, in our account. So if you're going to do it, use our page. We would love that. It's all linked here in the podcast description, or what we call the show notes of our episode today. Katie,
and the knife skills class is free, totally free, no strings attached. It's just like if you would then, you know, purchase our class, either our big full class or one of our little courses, Families of Character gets an awesome kickback. But start with the free stuff. See if your kids enjoy the knives.
Absolutely. I'm going to do it this Saturday. I've got stuff going on, you know, half of the day, and then the rest of the afternoon is just kind of free and open. So why not? I mean, we got a computer in our kitchen because we like to know what our kids are looking at, you know, and so they can be on the screen while we're cooking, or they can be looking up a recipe or showing us how to souffle something. We love to be in the kitchen together, I have to say. And I'm also going to say, parents, this is worth it. I've got a 17-year-old who's a senior in high school. He's got 2 jobs. He's like a busy man, but guess what he loves to do? He loves to cook healthy meals for the family. It saves us so much time. We've thought about paying him to be kind of like a personal chef, because salmon, asparagus, skirt steak, chipotle bowls, protein power bowls, like he loves it because he's been involved with cooking and engaging his senses. He started off in Montessori school, and that's always a good place to kind of get those skills. But like, he loves it. He digs it. He prefers that to like energy drinks and trash food. And we're like, is this real? Is this even happening in our home? But now the other 2 kids are super excited to get in there, and he's teaching them. And we're sitting back like, they pour our wine and serve us a steak. And I am not kidding. We have this on video. Okay. And pictures to prove it, but it's possible. So if you feel like that seems like a dream, that's something that you could never get to, go to kidscookrealfood.com. Check out what Katie's got. Start with all the free stuff. Go slow. 2 meals a week at the table. Pass the food around. Get people engaged. Give up the power struggle, parents and grandparents. Don't do it. No more bribes. No more of that cruddy feeling when you leave the table going, I don't even want to serve you people anymore. Instead, kind of harness that positivity. We're going to try it. We're going to give you options. The starving kids in Africa, stop saying that, right? That's just so old and dumb. It's not helping us, right? Instead, give your kids an opportunity to engage foods in a different way, in a new way every day, so that this picky eater stuff just kind of melts away into the background and this is not a thing anymore.
That's my dream right there. When you mentioned Chipotle bowls, I was like, oh, that's my daughter's favorite too. She's 15 and she's definitely my most selective eater. I think she's got a lot of sensory sensitivities, which is a gift. It makes her a sensitive soul as well. But she loves making those Chipotle bowls. I tell you what. And she's not a huge leftovers person, but she'll eat her leftovers when she cooks.
Yes.
I always cheer that on.
Exactly. You're not wasting food if you have a hand in making it and you like eating it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Katie. This has been wonderful. So grateful for your time today. And I hope you see some of our folks, cruising around your website and getting involved in some of your courses. I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to. This is fantastic what you have going on for families.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor really to share this. And I hope that there were some light bulb moments. That's all I'm looking for when I get to talk to parents.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And parents, if you aren't part of the Families of Character community, where you have an opportunity to know more about these opportunities with Katie and her website and cooking and things like that, be sure to jump into our private Facebook group. It's called the Thrive Community by Families of Character. And if you're not getting our emails already, go to familiesofcharacter.com, hit the subscribe button so that you get our weekly email newsletter. Every week we send out free resources for you. We might send coupon codes for a certain course, links to people's websites, and we definitely have sent out, Katie's TEDx talk about picky eating. So we'll post it on our social media. Don't worry, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and so you'll see it there too. But really make sure that you're connected with the Families of Character community so that you are getting all these resources and are notified of our podcast every time we have a new awesome guest like Katie on the show, so that you can just, turn the dial 1% or so in really unifying your family, improving your relationships, and having more joy around your house. So parents, we're going to catch you on another episode real soon. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you heard today, please share it with people in your community. And again, check out our YouTube video if you're not on there already, so that you can see us engage with one another. It's fun. All right, guys, we'll catch you on another episode real soon. Thank you.